I walked into the living room and I heard the most awful sound. It was a voice I just couldn't make sense of. Slow, stupid. It was like nails down a blackboard. Oh, imagine the horror when I realised that voice was mine. I was 8 or 9 years old and I was visiting some male cousins in Donegal. And they loved two things more than anything: the latest gadget and making fun of their English cousin. So they'd hidden a recorder and they'd captured my voice. And now they were playing it back. They thought it was hilarious. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me. Roll forward 10 years. I'm 19. I'm sitting on a sofa at a party off a place called the Sandy Row in Belfast. And for anybody that doesn't know, it's kind of a politically charged area. With every sip of my drink, my big Northern English accent is getting louder. I think I'm the life and soul of the party. Somebody else thinks different. The next thing, everything went black. I didn't know what had hit me, or should I say who. The next thing I remember is my friends lifting me from over the sofa and we ran for our lives. That day, I learned that my voice had the capacity to make me feel unsafe, to put me in danger. And so I did what most of us would maybe do. I went quiet. Silence felt like my shield. But what I didn't realise until too late was that instead of protecting me from the danger, the humiliation, it was stopping my truth, my message from reaching others. The girl that I've just talked about could never have pictured me breaking my silence on a stage at an event like this. So how do you learn to love the very thing that you've been taught is worthy of ridicule and even worse, danger? Silence shaped my choices. It stopped me from going after what I really wanted. In fact, it made me comply with things that I didn't. I ended up desperately unhappy in my career, struggling in relationships, hurting in friendships. So that silence I'd chosen to protect me from judgment, I started to realise was handing the story of who I was to everybody else. Now, I'm not going to ask you to put your hands up for this, but I am going to get you to think for a moment. Have you ever heard a recording of your own voice and felt that recoil of horror? I'm seeing nods. Well, if the research is correct, close to 60% of you will understand what I'm talking about. And it's not necessarily that you hate your voice in everyday conversation. That would be really difficult. But it's this recording. And it's because when we're in everyday conversation, we hear our voice through our bodies, through a mixture of air and vibration. But a recording strips that away. And so when you hear it back, it doesn't just sound unfamiliar, it feels unfamiliar. And when you couple that visceral reaction with a doubt in your message, then that can cause you to shut down. And so when people say, I hate my voice, I think quite often what they mean is, if I'm heard, I can be misunderstood. If I'm heard, I can be judged. If I'm heard, I can be rejected. If I'm heard, I can be hurt. And so the fear is no longer auditory, it's more personal and it's more vulnerable. And if you're part of a group, such as being a woman, a minority, who spent a lifetime being interrupted, talked over, dismissed, misread, then you don't just learn what not to say, you learn when not to speak. And so we hear the term imposter syndrome. And it gets me thinking about how it's not about feeling like a fraud, it's a lifetime of being treated as one. Because with every example of somebody ignoring your idea and passing it off as their own, policing your tone, questioning your authority, your brain is updating your rule book. And it's creating this imposter as a protective narrator. Wait, are you sure you're right about that? Oh, maybe now isn't the right moment. And so one of the greatest tragedies is perhaps that those of us who fear making that sound, those of us who fear speaking up, are the ones who think about our words the most deeply. We're the ones that feel the weight of being heard. And yet those with nothing to fear, those with even less worth saying, and I think you can guess who I'm talking about, have no problem peddling their drivel. So then silence becomes something that reinforces bias. Fewer voices in the room, fewer examples of authority, fewer stories on record. I had an English accent and an Irish name in a place not yet ready to accept somebody straddling the political divide. I learned that my voice could make me unsafe and change how I was perceived. And that's one of the challenges with our voice, is before we've heard a single idea, we've decided who looks or sounds worth listening to. History isn't neutral. It's shaped by those of us that are allowed to speak publicly. Women, minorities, we've always been part of the story, but we're rarely the ones holding the pen. And so the power of the human voice has never been more important than right now. With fake AI voices, bots, manufactured narratives, trained on a history that's false, coded on the agendas of rich white tech bros, threatening to drown out the truths, the voices, the messages that need to be heard. So there's never been a more important time than right now to use that voice. And I've learned in my lifetime, we may never know what impact our voice may have. We don't know who's listening, what lands. We don't know what sticks. But in a world that feels heavy right now, The power, the beauty of a human voice cannot be impersonated. And so we have to use it with care. We don't know the impact that we may have, and we don't know how our story can shift others. We may never know that. But we do know the power of a story to connect us, to help us feel not alone, and to see your experience is valid. And so I'm not standing here asking you to talk louder, to talk without fear. What I'm challenging you to do is ask yourself a question. If you feel the familiar pull from within to go quiet, instead of asking yourself, what will they think of me? I want you to consider challenging yourself with, what's the cost of my staying silent? Because silence hands our story into the hands of others and strips us of power. Voice reclaims it. And in a world that can generate endless noise, there's nothing more beautiful than a human voice, a human story, a human message choosing to be heard.